Trump, the US government, and even other countries around the world are expected to pour serious liquidity into XRP. And honestly, I couldn't be more pumped. There are a bunch of reasons to be excited right now, and on top of that, you're probably noticing you'll be seeing a lot more of my face again. I'm finally back in Canada after an amazing trip to Token 2049 over in Dubai. Trust me, I've got loads of awesome updates to share with you soon. But first, I want to kick things off by talking about what's brewing behind the scenes with the US government. There's a lot of insider chatter happening, and thanks to Coinbase, who, as you know, has deep connections with the US government, we've been getting some interesting glimpses into what's going on. All of this ties into the bigger geopolitical picture too, which is going to have a massive impact, not just on XRP but on other digital assets and even your favorite stocks. So to get things started, I'm going to play a quick clip for you. This is from the head of partnerships at Coinbase, and he dives deep into what he thinks is coming. He makes some really sharp points that are worth paying close attention to. Sometimes these ideas are so big that people either can't wrap their heads around them or just don't want to. But this, you've got to hear it. So what's the government saying? According to Coinbase, US officials are aiming to move forward with a plan focused on asset monetization. Now, what kind of assets are we talking about here? The plan with Fannie Freddie and those buildings is pretty straightforward. They'll likely just sell them off, which should bring in a good chunk of cash. That money could end up in the US government's pocket or be added to the sovereign wealth fund. Whether it's already part of that fund or not doesn't really matter right now. The key is that these assets are going to be monetized one way or another. But gold, that's where things get a little more interesting. To quote Marcel, his take is that if you really want to understand how gold plays into all of this, you've got to know the ins and outs of how central banks and the government's financial systems work. His view is that they might revalue gold and also start buying Bitcoin, all while keeping things budget neutral. Sounds complicated, right? Don't worry, he explains exactly how that could work, and I'm going to break it down for you step by step in just a moment. Stick around, because this is where things get really interesting. Right now, under current law, the US government still values all the gold stored in Fort Knox at about $42 per ounce. Yeah, you heard that right, just $42 and some change. But here's the thing, if they simply updated that value to match today's market price, it would instantly add somewhere between $900 billion and a full $1 trillion in extra value. That's a huge jump. A lot of people on Twitter and in public discussions think the government might revalue the gold and then sell off some of it to buy Bitcoin. But we don't actually think that's the most likely move. What seems more realistic is that sometime soon, maybe even within this year, they'll revalue gold to reflect its real current market price. Doing that alone would generate about $900 billion in gains just by updating the books. Now let's put some numbers into perspective. Remember Senator Lummis's bill? It proposed buying about 1 million Bitcoin over 5 years, which would cost around $100 billion. If my math checks out, that means the $900 billion gained from the gold revaluation would more than cover it. In fact, it leaves plenty of room to spare. So once that revaluation happens, it frees up $900 billion in new value. The US Treasury could tap into that, and through the Sovereign Wealth Fund, they could use that money in a budget-neutral way to invest in different assets. And yeah, Bitcoin is definitely on that list. Just think about it. Spending $100 billion out of a $900 billion gain doesn't even seem that massive when you look at the bigger picture. Now consider the ripple effect. No pun intended. Bitcoin's total market cap is around $1.8 trillion. Moving from a phase where the government wasn't really buying to suddenly making large meaningful investments is a big shift. And if the US starts doing this, it's hard to imagine that other governments around the world won't feel the pressure to follow suit. This could trigger what's basically an economic arms race. This is a major signal, and it's a huge deal, not just for Bitcoin. If you've been in the crypto space even for a short time, you know how it works. When Bitcoin moves, XRP moves, and the whole market tends to follow. Bitcoin might lead the way, but once the US starts investing, it's likely they'll include other digital assets and cryptocurrencies as part of their strategic reserves too. If you don't believe me, you can check it out for yourself. Head over to Donald Trump's Truth Social page and look at the post where he clearly states that the US is planning to strategically acquire XRP, Cardano, Ethereum, and a few other cryptocurrencies. Naturally, Bitcoin is also part of that list. That post is still live and public, and it's all part of the broader plan. I want to dig into this a bit because it's a huge deal. Basically, what we're looking at is the US government using about 10% of their net gains, like the kind of gains we were just talking about from Fort Knox and the gold revaluation, which is between $900 billion and $1 trillion toward buying assets like Bitcoin. That's around $100 billion potentially going into crypto. Now, I think that's a very realistic scenario, and if this actually happens, you can bet a lot of companies are going to follow the same path. It just makes sense. When you see hundreds of billions of dollars flooding into crypto, you know prices are going to rise. And if all these corporations also jump in at the same time, that could mean even more hundreds of billions flowing into XRP, Bitcoin, and other top cryptocurrencies over the long haul. Let's be real for a second. The US economy isn't just driven by government spending. It's powered by countless companies and corporations that have been waiting for clear regulatory green lights from the government. And honestly, what clearer sign could you ask for than the US government itself buying Bitcoin or XRP and adding it to its sovereign wealth fund or strategic reserves? This kind of move is going to set a huge example, not just for the US but for the entire world. Other countries are definitely going to watch closely to see the impact and figure out how they can benefit too. I'm seriously pumped to see how this plays out because it could reshape everything. Earlier in the video, I also mentioned some geopolitical stuff that's been making waves, and Trump recently dropped a bombshell on that front too. He announced that he plans to lower tariffs on China at some point in the future. That's a big deal. If you've been following him, you know he's been pretty firm in the past about keeping those tariffs in place. So I want to play that clip for you quickly, and then we'll break it down. In the clip, Trump is asked if he's planning to lift tariffs on China to bring them back to the negotiating table. His response: "Those tariffs are staying put. Why would I drop them?" But then he added, "At some point I am going to lower them, because if you don't, you can't really do business with them. And they want to do business badly. Their economy is really struggling, it's collapsing." So here's what's going on. Trump slapped those tariffs on China to put pressure on their economy. China depends heavily on the US and of course on trading with the EU, Canada, and other major partners to keep their economy strong. Naturally, those tariffs have hit them hard. Trump is basically using this as leverage, sending a message to China: you need us more than we need you. Let's fix this trade deficit. Pretty smart negotiating move, honestly. One thing to keep in mind is that the full impact of these tariffs hasn't completely hit US consumers yet. We're still working through some supply chain backlogs, so you might not have felt the full effect of those higher prices just yet, but it's something to stay aware of moving forward.